As most of you all know, the teachings are about turning inwards. The reason we turn inwards is because we want to remove ignorance. Ignorance is the habitual tendency to wrongly identify as a limited entity. The habitual tendency to wrongly identify with a limited entity. To think of yourself as being limited in some way. The normal form of ignorance is to take yourself to be the body-mind. There's a strong habitual tendency to think, for thought to keep on thinking of itself as being a body-mind. And what you'll tend to find is, unless you turn inwards, that habitual tendency will keep on coming back. That habitual tendency will keep on coming back. You can find lots of peace, have lots of insights without turning inwards, without turning within. Yes, you can. You can even have, relatively profound glimpses of non-duality, etc., etc. But the ego keeps coming back, keeps on coming back. Why? The habitual tendency. The habitual tendency. The momentum of ignorance, the momentum of egotism makes the ego keep on coming back, it keeps on returning. The verbal teachings, the scriptures, things like this, they remind you that you're not the body-mind. And the greater you're able to, in quotes, accept that, the more peaceful your life. But the egotism keeps coming back. So you keep on needing the teacher, the teachings, the books, the videos, right? Do you see what I'm saying? The habitual tendency to identify as a small me, small self comes back. So you keep on needing the antidote. Teacher, teachings, books, whatever form of teaching, videos, whatever form of teachings you're accessing. So there's a lovely problem, ignorance, and then there's a remedy, satsangs, teachers, teachings. Oh, the ego comes back again. Oh, I need to go to another satsang now. Oh, that's better. I feel more at peace now at the satsang. Something's happening. I like this teacher. I like this teaching. I'm feeling at peace in this in this satsang, in this meeting. Or I read a book and that makes me feel better. You see what I mean? You keep on purchasing a remedy for your ailment. When I say purchasing, I'm not necessarily talking about spending money, although often it involves spending money, but not always. I'm talking about consuming. That's a better word. Consuming. You have to consume another teaching as an antidote to remove the ignorance, and that works for a while. Then the ignorance keeps on coming back. It's frustrating. And the annoying thing about the ignorance is that when it comes back, it can create confusion. You know how it appeared so clear, maybe? Maybe it has never appeared clear to some of you, I don't know. But I'm sure to many of you, at some points, it seemed all so simple, all so clear. You've got it now, the rest of your life. You've sorted it out, you've figured it out. Yes, done, dusted. You've sorted it all out. And then 30 seconds later, the next day, or a period of time later, it's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. What's happening? I'm confused. Maybe you're anxious, maybe you're worried. Oh, okay, what practice do I need to do? Okay, what teaching do I need to read? Oh, what formula works for this, And the mind's friend starts to maybe get a bit panicky even and start to look around. Do you see what I mean? This keeps on happening. Why? As I said, it's the habitual tendency for the ego to arise. How to sort this out without relying on people like me, right? Which is the point of the teachings, not to rely on someone external to you, not to rely on a book or a teacher or a teaching. Well, this teacher, this teaching claims to be slightly different to some other teachings, perhaps, because what we're doing is providing you with a means by which you can become independent of teachers and teachings. And that means, and the people who know me better will know that I'm not clever enough to have come up with this myself. The means by which we can attain liberation is through self-inquiry. And Guru Ramana Maharishi has given us this teaching. And it's the same teaching. You find it in other places, other cultures perhaps as well, if you look hard enough. It's the one ultimately effective teaching. And other teachings might be effective if they help bring you towards self-inquiry. We can also call those effective teachings, or we can call them secondary teachings or indirect teachings. They're very good too, because they help bring you to self-inquiry. But eventually you need to come to self-inquiry, in which we turn within, abide as the self, destroy egotism and the habitual tendency for the ego to arise at its root. So all the verbal teachings, all these meetings, all these books and everything, or whatever, my blog, Facebook posts, whatever, these are, in my view, all there to remind you to turn within. And if they do that for you, then they're helpful to you. If they don't do that for you, then they're not so helpful to you. Then maybe you're just using them for entertainment, or you need to find something that works better for you. It's a practical teaching. Yes, you can see perhaps there's a slight element of it being goal orientated. Yes, of course, because we're looking for something. So there appears to be a goal. When the goal is reached, we realize there was no real obstacle that needed to be overcome in the first place. And I can tell you now, in fact, I will tell you now. How's that? Not only can I tell you, I will tell you that there is no obstacle needed for you to overcome right now. The freedom that you're looking for is totally, utterly here, clear as day. But never known to the body-mind. Never will be known by the body-mind, never has been known by the body-mind. We don't have to say body-mind, we can just say mind. Mind will never know this. Has never known this, will never know this. But it is always, always fully known. You always know this. But the mind never knows this. So what the mind thinks, for example, the mind might say, I've got this, or it might say, I don't know what's going on, I'm confused, I don't understand this. Irrespective of what the mind's thinking, of what the emotions are feeling, of what the body is doing, this is totally known, always. That is the self. That is the nature of the self. It knows itself, it is itself, always, eternally. So when we say this can be discovered or realized, it's not really, well, it's not really discovered or realized. What happens is the apparent obstacles to realization or discovery just fall away. The veil that appeared to be blocking your vision of truth just parts and falls away. The clouds part, and the sun behind them, which was ever shining, always shining as yourself, is revealed. So all we have to do is remove the apparent obstacles. And that is what self-inquiry does. And hence its value to all sincere seekers. And what we tend to find is that for some reason, self-inquiry is a very simple practice, but a few things happen. One, the mind finds it difficult to understand what self-inquiry is for some reason. Two, the mind finds it difficult to do self-inquiry sometimes. So sometimes it's a matter of me just better explaining what self-inquiry is. Sometimes, often, it's just a matter of you trying, failing, figuring out through trial and error, perseverance. And also, there are other supportive practices, these secondary practices that are very important for many of us, which help us approach self-inquiry. In reality, we don't need these supportive practices, but because Maya or ignorance can be very thick, very dense, these supportive practices are there to help us approach self-inquiry. These can be psychological practices. These can be energy work practices. These can be practices involving the body, the breath, speech, sound. All these different yogas. We can broadly categorize all these secondary practices that bring us towards self-inquiry as yogas. And we can categorize self-inquiry as the ultimate yoga, the Maha Yoga. Maha means great. Maha Yoga. Like Maha in Maharishi, means great Rishi. Maha. Like Maha as in Mahatma Gandhi. Maha Atma. Maha means great. Atma means Atman, means the self. Mahatma Gandhi, the great, they call him the great soul Gandhi, the great self, the great one. Mahayoga, self-inquiry. So as you sit here in Satsang, I invite you just to relax your mind. Allow the thoughts to try slightly fall away. More might come along, and allow them to become weaker and weaker and weaker. They allow them to come and go. The thoughts don't matter. But we're not primarily paying attention to the thoughts. Let them come and go. As the mind stills, the vision of oneness can come in, meaning the distance between you and the whole phenomenal world can be reduced to zero. The distance that you think is there between you and objects goes. You think I'm over here and something else is over there. Suddenly, everything is one with your being. Everything appears in your isness as your isness. This vision of oneness arises as the egoic thoughts disappear. Everything is seen to be just a display of consciousness, including the body, mind, and all the objects in the world. And non-verbally, you intuit yourself to be that consciousness. It's like a state of raw experience without too much interpretation going on in terms of subject object, in terms of me and other. Once we come to this vision of oneness, the technical term for this is samadhi, but it's a samadhi containing objects. We can see the objects, so that's called savikalpa samadhi. Savikalpa, sa means with, and vikalpa in this context means thoughts or objects or things appearing in the consciousness. The vikalpas are the things that appear in the consciousness in this context. So savikalpa samadhi is when the sense of egotism isn't very strong, becomes very, very weak, and the objects are appearing, but they all appear one with us. Yeah. And then eventually we're not turned within yet because we're still attending to objects, but then eventually we turn within and the objects recede. And that becomes nirvikalpa samadhi. Nir, sa means with, nir means it's negating, means without or no. So no vikalpas, no objects, objectless samadhi. And it's this objectless samadhi that purifies us, that is abiding as the self. In Avaita Vedanta, nirvikalpa samadhi means to abide as the self. They're the same thing. Savikalpa samadhi is not to identify with any objects, even though objects are appearing. Everything appears and you are none of these objects. You're not saying necessarily, oh, I am none of these objects, although you can. And that would be a lower form of savikalpa samadhi. But in the higher form, the belief or the phrase or the mantra, I am not the objects, I am the subject, is not there. It's all subsided. Just the oneness, vision of oneness is non-verbally, non-conceptually there. And we see this in the traditional texts. They talk about how the seeker goes from a savikalpa state to the nirvikalpa state. There's a very beautiful verse in Vivekachudamani that talks about the transition from this vision of oneness with objects present and then turning inwards, abiding as the self proper, which is truly purifying, which leads to realization, moksha, freedom. So as you're listening, if your eyes are open, you're seeing the objects, allow that savikalpa state to come in. It's just being and allowing things to be and not taking yourself to be any of these things.